I'd like to call the meeting to order and good morning, everybody. Welcome to UMKC. Welcome to the fall meeting of the Missouri Board of Curators. Maybe if with my power, I should move us all outside today because it looks nice. But thank you for all coming. I want to welcome Chancellor Mo Dogani for his first meeting with us from Missouri S&T, and Kristen Sobolik, who is the interim chancellor at UMSL. She's been with us a while, but the first time as interim chancellor. She came to Kansas City by train on Tuesday from St. Louis and had a great trip, so welcome. I publicly want to thank Jamie Farmer, who is no longer on the board. Jamie's business took her to Texas now as a Texas resident, so had to resign her position, and that will be filled sometime by the governor. We never know that time frame. So first thing we want to get started by this morning is the oath of office for new curator.
That did it. That was the answer.
Hello? Start with the recognition on the curator's distinguished professors. So across the system, faculty has been one of the greatest sources of strength. And today I'd also like to recognize standout faculty at UMKC who over the past year has been designated with the highest honor, the curator's distinguished professors and distinguished teaching professors, including emeritus professors. At this time, I would like all of the curator's distinguished professors in attendance. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call up one at a time, and then we can stand and line up together. So the first one, Professor Joseph Parisi joined UMKC Conservatory of Music and Dance in 2002. He's one of the country's foremost brass conductors and also established the Fountain City Brass Band, which is the highest ranked American brass band in history. Today we recognize Dr. Parisi as a curator's distinguished professor. You can come up here, it'll be fine. The next one I'd like to recognize, Professor Jane Greer joined UMKC Department of English in 1996. Her service and contribution to have been substantial at the department, university, and professional level, including various leadership positions, such as co-chair of the General Education 2.0 Task Force, Director of Composition, and Director of Undergraduate Studies. Today we recognize Dr. Greer as a curator's distinguished teaching professor. Professor Virginia Blanton joined UMKC Department of English in 2002. She's published 32 journal articles, co-edited 8 essay collections, and her book on the cult of St. Ethelthryth won 2 awards for the best book of the year. Now, I said that, and you can correct me. I asked 7 people yesterday when I was on campus. Today we recognize Dr. Blanton as curator's distinguished professor.
I'll try.
Professor Wai-Ying Ching joined the UMKC Department of Physics in 1978. He's been elected as a Fellow of the American Association for Advancement of Science, elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry in the United Kingdom, and elected to the Academy of the World Academy of Ceramics. Today we recognize Dr. Ching as the Curator's Distinguished Professor Emeritus. Professor Kun Cheng joined the UMKC School of Pharmacy in 2007. He is considered an expert in his field due to the number of times his research has been called and has been published in over 50 highly respected journals. Today we recognize Dr. Cheng as Curator's Distinguished Professor. Professor Jerry Diaz joined UMKC Department of Chemistry in 1972. He's been elected as a Fellow of the American Institute of Chemists and to the International Academy of Mathematical Chemistry. Today we recognize Dr. Diaz as a Curators Distinguished Professor Emeritus. Professor Felicia Landre joined the UMKC Department of Theater in 1978. She's published 17 books as well as 63 research articles and book chapters in high-impact, peer-reviewed journals and publications. Today we recognize Dr. Landre as a Curator's Distinguished Professor Emerita. And could I have another hand for everybody there? As I continue, I want to again welcome our new colleague, Michael Williams, from right here in Kansas City. Your service to the university and to the state of Missouri as a member of this board comes at a great time. We have seen the motto used recently as excellent through innovation. I know Dr. Moon Choi has used that, a new University of Missouri system. That puts the onus on us as a board and the leaders of the university to think, to strive higher, and then to execute. And that's been a key to our board. I've been on a lot of teams in my life, from a sports analogy, and sometimes teams are analyzed internally. And I'd like to tell you, Michael, a little bit about this board in particular. So to your right, Jeff Lehman. Jeff is chair of our audit committee and has stepped in since Curator Farmer had to resign her position and helped me out last week in some meetings. Jeff is analytical. He's a finance guy. He digs deep, listens until he needs to speak, and then will voice what he feels is his opinion. He's tough, he's committed, and he makes him a great board member. Daryl Chapman, two to your right. He's not as tough as he looks, but he's great for this board. Daryl's nickname when he was in college as a football player was Chopper. His defensive coach, Skip Hall, I believe, gave him the nickname Chopper because he chopped down running backs when they were on the move. Daryl's got great patience. He is in depth about everything that we do on the board. Currently, he's chair of the longest title, Academic, Student Affairs, Research, and Economic Development Committee. A very valuable committee because you'll see later on all the programs that we're adding. Daryl takes this very seriously as a curator and has been committed 2 years ago when we redid the CRR, the things we did, he was vitally important to that. Marcy Graham, if you travel the state of Missouri, and Michael, you're in the legal business, and you mentioned Maurice Graham to anybody, you're going to get everybody's going to say, what a true gentleman, and he is. He has been very valuable to our board. He led this board 2 years ago. I think he burns up the most miles in his car that drives to different meetings in Columbia at different times. Very valuable. I say gentleman, but he will get down in the weeds and get tough on issues that need to be tough. And that's what we like about Marcy. Moving across, Curator Burnsick. She has a new car. I just found out it's electric. The faster you go, the more power it uses. But she made it here from St. Louis. Curator Burnsick is the chair of our Finance Committee. And I forgot to mention Curator Graham is chairman of the Health Affairs Committee. And again, when Curator Farmer had to step aside, Curator Graham stepped in and chaired the External Affairs and Marketing Committee last week. So thank you, Marcy, for that. Back to Curator Burnsick. She chairs our Finance Committee. She's tough. She's fair. She digs deep on issues and items. She's the best multitasker of the group, can handle lots of things all the time. And what we appreciate, or what I appreciate about what Julia does, is nothing really slips past when we're trying to evaluate and monitor where we're going. She won't let it pass, and that's valuable. Next in line, David Steelman, Rolla, Missouri, chairman last year. I nicknamed him once, probably not fair to Kev nicknames. I nicknamed him the Maverick. Curator Steelman can be tough. He will usually pull the country lawyer thing on you, Michael, that I don't know what I'm talking about, but, and then he'll give you a 10-minute brilliance of what he's talking about. He heads up the governance. He's chair of the Governance and Resource Committee. But what I like best about what David has done to this board is he keeps us thinking way down the road. Not only now, but he keeps pushing. What's the innovative way that higher education, where's it going? And how do we get there as a board? Next, Phil Snowden, the quarterback from right here in Kansas City. Phil is sometimes I'd say the gentle giant, but as a quarterback, what you always know is quarterbacks remember everything. And they remember where things are, who needs to do what. In committees, he is going to pull a question that will pull out a number from maybe 2 meetings ago that no one thought about. If the chart says that we're going to reduce something by $20 million, he will say, wasn't that number 25 million 3 months ago? Just pulls it out. He is committed to the university, has been for a long time. And we appreciate all the things that Phil does. He is the chair of the compensation committee, which is very valuable to all those that are thinking about their contracts. That's our team. That's our group. Individually, I would say this about a curator, myself included. You join a board and you try to learn as much as you can, and you find out you don't know as much as you thought you might know about higher education. So you join a group that the people I mentioned that have been here a while, that have developed individually as better curators, which then makes us better collectively. And it's not too far from maybe what our university system is. We have these 4 universities within this system. Individually, they're all different. Individually, they like their differences. When you come to a campus like UMKC, they're proud of who they are. Individually, as a board, we want each of the schools, universities, to be better. We want graduation rates better. We would like research better, right? We want all the metrics that we talk about better individually. Collectively, then that makes our system outstanding. It was a year ago, almost to the day, about 5 days apart, here, that this board made a commitment to a 5-year research spending. The discussion became not all of these schools in this system are the same. We initially threw out, we're going to double research in 5 years. Curator John Phillips from Kansas City, who's just walking in. Good timing. Curator Phillips raised a question about all of these schools aren't the same when we're talking about research. And he was correct. So really the onus a little bit is on the University of Missouri Columbia to double their research in 5 years. It's the AAU institution. The other 3 different. We looked at UMKC and thought, okay, what can we do and where can it go? And we want them to up their research by 50% in 5 years. A different place. If we think of UMKC, what a great place. Michael, you're from Kansas City. What a phenomenal city, a vibrant city. Last year when we had lunch, I sat with 2 young ladies at my table. One was from western Kansas. One was from northwest Iowa. And I said, why UMKC? Both young ladies said they didn't want to go to a college town. They wanted a city school. And when they visited UMKC, it was the right fit. 2 campuses. One campus located close to Crown Center, the Crossroads, Power and Light District, and then obviously this campus, close to the Plaza, Nelson Art Gallery. When you think of an urban school, I did some digging and thought, okay, what does an urban school, an urban research public university, bring differently than what what Mizzou does? So here's what I dug up. Urban schools. So the Brookings Institute study of urban schools found that they produce 80% more licensing agreements, 123% more inventions, 222% more income from licensing agreements, and 71% more startups than schools in other settings. How does that fit here at UMKC? 2014, UMKC professor Razat Derkshani created iVerify, which many of us know, one of the first biometric password replacement inventions. iVerify was acquired by Alibaba for $100 million in 2016. 2017, KC SourceLink, which is a program of the UMKC Innovation Center, found that startups accounted for 65% of all jobs created in Kansas City between 2012 and 2016. Urban schools matter. Urban schools that specialize in STEM fields are more likely to receive funding from nonprofits. 2018, the Kauffman Foundation awarded KC STEM Alliance at the UMKC School of Computing and Engineering a $1.1 million to keep expanding STEM education programs. We also know what urban schools, universities do, A, for employment, B, to attract young people vibrant to come to a city, and the importance that UMKC has to the city of Kansas City. As you know, I was out last night at a meal, and someone came up to me and talked about UMKC and what has happened in the last couple years. More marketing, more visibility, and there's a pride here now that UMKC has in this city. 18 months ago, I'm just moving through. 18 months ago, so a year ago we did, 18 months ago, led by Chairman Steelman, this board made a number one priority, which they've never done before, and that was the next-gen precision health. We know that it's located, it's going to be located in Columbia. And there became questions about how do we collaborate, how do we get all the schools involved. It's already happening. It's already happening. And through this collaboration, each campus will be heavily involved. So where's UMKC? Because we're here, where's that strength? Well, right now it's at the Data Science Hub, and it is gaining traction nationally. Their strength will be essential in the next-gen precision health initiative. Investing in building this strength will bring new capabilities to our researchers and new opportunities for our students. We're really just seeing the beginning of the stages for the incredible possibilities that UMKC will tap with this strength. Yesterday, the campus hosted the UM System Research Summit, Data Science in Healthy Communities, where researchers shared their stories of leveraging new technologies to transform healthcare. UMKC scientists are pursuing projects with impacts that will be felt across the UM system. These developments are not just going to transform UMKC, but they will build an entirely new relationship between the city and the university, bringing benefits to our students and our local communities. Many of us on the board already have been told what NextGen can mean to the state of Missouri, to the people of Missouri, and to the people nationally. And we're excited that it's part of our system. Individually, I think all of our campuses are getting stronger and need to continue to get stronger, much like our board. With collaboration, collectively, we get stronger as a system. Michael, welcome to our board. I gave you a brief outline who they are. Members, I thank you always for your time. I appreciate the fact that we've changed the schedule and you're very good on the committees the week before. And today I look forward to a very productive day. With that, I will turn it over to our track star, who might start wanting to race Usain Bolt after I saw him sprint, President Choi.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Sunvolt. Actually, the track star is Latha Ramchan. She won the first race, so congratulations. Very competitive provost. Let me begin by sharing with you some of the exciting developments that we have at the university, not only last year, but several years. This is the measure of first-time college student acceptances across the system and at Mizzou. The reason that I'm highlighting Mizzou is that Mizzou, a few years ago, had one of the worst downturns in enrollment, and I want to demonstrate how much they've come, working closely with the chancellors, with every single member of the enrollment management group, as well as alums, to regain the narrative that Mizzou and the University of Missouri System universities are strong universities that provide high quality education. As you can see, we are seeing an overall growth in the first time college students across the system over the past several years. A measure that's very important for all of us because it demonstrates the importance of student success, reputation, as well as the ability of our students to go out and earn the kind of a living that they can use to pay back some of their loans and investments that they made at the university. I'm very pleased to see that Mizzou has increased their graduation rate to 71%, and S&T increased it to 66%. We have some work to do still because we all know that this is not where we need to be. So we have a lot of work to do to help increase these graduation rates. We also look at Pell graduation rates. And when I look at the Pell graduation rates, there's work to do at UMKC and UMSL. And it's important to talk about access, but access without completion is not what we want for our students. And so we're going to work very hard to identify ways to increase the graduation rates for all demographics at our university. First year retention rates, those numbers at Mizzou, UMKC, and UMSL are positive, but S&T has gone in the wrong direction. We need to find out why. These are aggregate numbers, but every individual that contributes to this number, whether they retain or they leave the university, has a story. What is their story? We need to find out why they are leaving the university and try to correct that moving forward. The reason that graduation rate is so important is we are concerned about the student success, reputation, and the third component is revenue. If we look at the students that graduated, that enrolled as first-time college students in 2012, we had 9131 students start. But only 5896 graduated 6 years later. And so what are the reasons that those 3235, which represents 35%, did not graduate? They may still be in the program. Or they left for financial or academic reasons, transferred to a different university, or other reasons. But unless we find out why they are leaving and try to correct for it, then we're not going to have a handle on addressing the graduation rate issue. In terms of our research, total research proposals, I believe $1.651 billion as a system is the highest that we've ever achieved. And at Mizzou, they're at 1.2 billion. But the chancellor will say he would like to see Mizzou's number be at 2 billion so that they are competitive with other AAU universities. It's not going to happen overnight, but we need to put in the programs, incentives, and infrastructures to allow us to grow research, not only at Mizzou, but all 4 universities. Research awards have also had a very nice uptick between last year and this year, and that's a positive sign. And the most important research metric, obviously, is expenditures. But we have to look at the leading indicators, which come in the form of proposals as well as research awards. Total annual philanthropic contributions across the system remain strong, but it's going to have to be even stronger because of the fact that state support for public education, not only in this state, but throughout the United States, is going to have some challenging periods coming ahead. So we need to be able to generate our own revenue through innovative programs and relying more and more on philanthropy. And as a result, the endowment value has topped $1.5 billion for the first time in the history, and Mizzou's endowment hit $1.1 billion. So I shared all of that information because we made a lot of progress because of the excellent work of the leaders, the faculty, staff, and the alums and students that we have at the university. These are the new leaders who are going to help us continue that growth. And I'm not going to go through individually, but those who are here, ranging from the new chancellor to an individual who's going to be leading our diversity efforts at the system. If I can ask you to stand, if you're in the audience, I see Mo, I see Kristen, Christine, Marcia, Michelle. Oh, are there others or no? Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for all of your hard work already. But as you can see, we still have a lot of work to do, and we look forward to working with you to achieve those goals. Some updates on federal appropriations. Dusty Schneiders, working very closely with Mark McIntosh and our federal lobbying team, were able to get a number of key projects supported at the federal level. The most important one for us is the VA support to support NextGen. But we also learned through the work of Chris Stalbert and Scott Brown that they are also considering a $25 million facility for biosciences. And the $22 million defense bill, it's already been passed by the House and the Senate. It goes to conference to be signed by the president. This is the largest defense bill spending that we received at the university. And many of these projects are also collaborations across the campuses where it makes sense, where the proposal has been strengthened because of the partnership of experts that we have across the system. A few more highlights at UMKC through the hard work of the Chancellor Agarwal, Lisa Baronio, but also Jay Wilson, who helped to formulate the partnership opportunities with the Block Foundation and the Sunderland Foundation. These investments will go towards the highest priority that UMKC has in creating student success, research, and engagement. A few weeks ago, we announced a $20.5 million investment to support NextGen Precision Health and other projects. 19 projects were selected. 7 of these projects are major collaborations across the campuses, and about 12 of these projects supported Precision Health Initiative and Precision Health Institute, which is the building that will be built in Columbia. An exciting project related to this is to develop a Center of Excellence for Electron Microscopy. And we've awarded $4 million to Professor Chapman to develop a suite of capabilities working with an industry partner that will enable the faculty members to understand cellular processes in biological tissue and bone material. And electron microscopy currently has a resolution of 0.05 nanometers. And that resolution, 0.05, is about 1.2 million times thinner than the diameter of a human hair. So we're able to look at materials at the atomic level, which was unheard of 20 years ago. And our goal is to leverage our 4 million into a major center that we expect to be anywhere from 20 to 25 million for the UM system. The next project, another collaborative project, involves 2 investigators one from Mizzou, one from UMKC. This will be a physical space, so it'll be a satellite NextGen Precision Health Institute here in Kansas City for data analytics. And our goal here, once again, is to develop a partnership with donors and industry partners to have a center that is probably going to spend about $15 to $20 million to set up. So we're very excited about this. Some major grants at the university. Dr. Kathleen Quinn has developed a proposal to improve the training of medical professionals to serve rural Missouri. This program ties in very nicely with the plans that Marshall Stewart has to use extension to improve healthcare for those who suffer from the disparities based on where they live. And this also strengthens our partnership with Springfield for the Springfield Medical Campus. UMKC right here has a tremendous School of Dental Medicine, and dental medicine faculty members Linda Bonewood, Mark Johnson, and Sarah Dallas received a major grant from NIH to better understand how bones deteriorate with age. But in the process, how do you strengthen bone so it has better compressive and tensile strength? And this will have a major impact for bones and tissues that are going to be needed as we age and as we age into to become octogenarians and still have a viable life going forward. At Missouri S&T, Professor David Lipke received a major grant to better understand how to use heat exchangers to increase efficiencies. With all of the heat that's generated, if you can recycle that heat, then you can increase the overall efficiency and reduce the amount of carbon footprint that comes out of a power plant. Last but not least, Professor Kimberly Werner from UMSL has developed a study to look at the disparities of care for veterans, female veterans who suffer from PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And as part of this process, she wants to better understand how do we deliver care to female soldiers that have that disparity because of perhaps biases that occur or signal detection that can better improve that detection of TBI in a female soldier. Last but not least, let me share with you where we've been and where we are going. I'm starting my third academic year at this university. And back in 2017, the university faced a significant headwind. You could see the auditor's report that was scathing. We had some cuts from the state budget. We were also facing a $100 million cut by June of 2017. But what I recall the board members sharing with me during my first meeting was to say, these are challenges that your team must solve. And that's absolutely true. We could not have overcome these challenges without the strong support from the board, as well as tremendous work of every single member of the university community to get us out of the challenging situation that we faced in March of 2017. In fact, at the time, then Governor Eric Greitens said that our performance was one of the worst, or probably the worst, of any flagship university. And he was right. We couldn't do business as usual. And so with the strong direction set by the Board of Curators, we have now made important changes in the way we do our business. So in 2019, enrollments are up. Donations are up. Research is showing a healthy rebound. But at the same time, we also recognize there is a lot of work to do ahead. And that's why we appreciate the support from the board chair, and the deep commitment from all of us who are in this room to ensure that we create 4 great universities as part of the UM system. Just recently, Governor Parson shared with the community of farmers down in Portageville, Missouri, the fact that this university did the hard work to turn the university around. But I also recognize that things can go south very quickly if we lose sight of what is important. We should always go back to the Missouri Compacts and say it's student success, research, and engagement with our community and citizens in Missouri. So last but not least, a very important activity that we have to really cement our foundation for the Missouri Compact is the Next Gen Precision Health Institute and initiative. So I want to share with you an exciting video that demonstrates what this building will look like. And this is going to be a spectacular facility that creates collaboration across the UM system to benefit healthcare in Missouri. So with that, can you roll the video? that concludes my report.
Thank you, President Choi. Next on the list, e-learning at the UM system. Matt Gunkel. Matt, is he here? Yep.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here this morning. So I would actually like to get started by bringing EY up. And so we're going to have Haven Ladd actually kick off the e-learning presentation and really, I think, just help finish off a lot of the conversation that you've had with them over the past year.
Good morning, and thank you all. Presented in front of this group about 8 months ago now, pardon my voice, and during that time set the stage for what was very clearly a big opportunity here in the state of Missouri and the surrounding states to grow online. A lot has happened since then, and I want to spend just 2 or 3 minutes providing a couple facts for the market that I think are important to you as curators to frame this whole opportunity and provide a little bit of context for the work that has been done here and the position that Matt has now stepped into. So I think I have control of these. So a couple facts first, and this is important. When we look at overall enrollment growth in the United States over the last 15 years, all of the growth has come from online and hybrid students. So if you look on the far right of this slide, we've seen negative growth rates of on-ground students, negative about 3% between 2012 and 2017, whereas online and hybrid have been growing in the sort of mid-single digits. All of our work across the United States suggests that this trend will continue, but it is not evenly distributed across all schools. And that's the second point I want to leave all of you with. This slide, and I apologize that it's a little bit small in terms of the data, but I'll speak to it, talks about the notion that the gains in online are not coming evenly across all institutions that are trying to put up online programs. In fact, on the left of the slide, we see that the growth rate of enrollment is substantially higher at schools and universities which have more than 20 online programs. Thought about in a different way, on the right, the growth of enrollment has been about 10%. Growth of online enrollment has been about 10% for a select set of schools that we define as nationally scaled online institutions. There's 17 colleges and universities in that category that have over about 20,000 students that are online or hybrid at each school. And they've been growing at about 10% a year. Names such as ASU, SNHU, Western Governors, University of Maryland University College, which is now Global Campus, those folks. The rest of the schools out to the right, whether they are in the semi-scaled category or regionally focused online institutions, have not achieved the rates of growth that the big ones have. So for context of what the University of Missouri system now is trying to do online, it is to get into the left-hand bar of the right-hand chart and the right-hand bar of the left-hand chart, to become scale, efficient, high-quality providers of online options for students in the state and for students in some surrounding states. And that is not easy to do. Over the last 7 or 8 months, as we've been working with the system, a lot has happened. And I think I presented last time I was here around sort of the phase 1 initial results, which basically says there is a market opportunity. There's an unmet need for many students in the state of Missouri to get higher quality online offerings than are currently provided. And the University of Missouri system should meet that need. Phase 2 then developed a strategic plan and direction and operating model to begin to achieve that. And then we've rolled into a phase of implementation, which has really started as Matt has joined, and I'll turn it over to him in just a second. But I want to highlight the collaborative work across the 4 universities in this system and the central administration, which is unique in developing a system-wide approach to online learning that takes advantage of the best capabilities that each one of the 4 campuses has to offer. This is not the way that other institutions are trying to drive online. This is new, this is unique, and this is right for Missouri. And it's really exciting. And over the last few months, as we think about the implementation of phase 3, I counted up the hours that the senior leaders and administrators across the 4 campuses, as well as the central office, have spent on this topic. And over the last 3 months, it's been well over 1,000 hours of leadership time, individual leadership time, driving this. This is exciting, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'll turn it over to Matt to talk about where he is going as the Chief E-Learning Officer. And thank you for the opportunity to present this morning.
Thank you, Haven. So with that, I would really like to go ahead, and the first thing that I would like to do is thank EY. So for those of you that don't know, we have formally concluded our engagement with EY. And again, to all of their lengthy time and commitment and great partnership that they have provided, thank you, Haven, and Ernst & Young Parthenon. The next thing that I would really like to do, and I really have sort of one key takeaway really from this entire presentation this morning, and that is actually to emphasize Haven's last point, is the 1,000 man hours and 40 plus meetings that people have attended. And so the first thing that I would really like to do is begin by really thanking those people that had laid a lot of the groundwork before I even came on site, before my first day, probably even before I even knew I was going to be in this role or this position with the University of Missouri system. And so to that end, I would like to formally thank Steve Graham for everything that he did in really organizing and shaping and driving, I think, people into this initiative over the last 10 months. I would also really like to extend a formal thank you, and as we really get into some of the meat of the presentation, to Interim Chancellor Kristen Sobolik, and also to Alex Cartwright and Latha Ramchan and their offices for all of the great work that they've done and the really strong commitment that they have made really in supporting and onboarding me into this effort. And really, I think their continued favorable, strong commitment into how we can ultimately continue to craft and shape e-learning. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. With that, so what are we ultimately trying to do, right? So I think this gets at Haven's goal and ultimately what we're attempting to accomplish, right? And so this has been the formally stated mission and sort of vision for what we've been talking about, and really working to think about how are we providing additional educational opportunities to the state of Missouri and the surrounding region. So in really looking at a lot of the work that EY did, this is a lot of the outcome, right? So if you look over the pages and pages and pages of documents, notes, and information, this is ultimately the analysis work that they have provided. And so this is the foundation that we're going to continue to operate on as we head into sort of the next 12 to 36 months and really looking at our planning and really looking at our strategy as we start to move forward. So again, coming back to this opportunity, so I do just want to sort of remind everyone about the volume and the scale of really what we're talking about in the state of Missouri, and really how many people there potentially are who continue to have educational interests within the state and who we believe we can serve as part of this e-learning endeavor within the state of Missouri. And again, if you look a little broader, we will also be focusing on the region, right? So we'll be looking at this overall population of about 1.5 million people, and really the opportunity that we present to them to bring them into our strong brands across the University of Missouri system, and hopefully to really strongly compete, as Haven showed in his opening slides, with the ASUs, SNHUs of the world, and to help our students stay close to home. So some key objectives that we've really been working on in thinking about e-learning and really trying to understand how are we going to do some of these things and what were the concepts that we really wanted to bring to bear as we started to move forward. So one, we definitely want to continue to serve new students and adult and traditional students through e-learning. So we want to continue to build out those populations within the state. We also want to think about some additional flexibility, and this is kind of where we get at design and online learning programs, stackable certificates, and really work to service the workforce needs within the state. And so I think you're going to hear some more about this today as we get into some of the programming, but you're also going to continue to hear how the Office of E-Learning would really like to work with the universities to sort of reshape the number of starts, the time to starts, and then also, again, the flexibility that are available to our students within the state. So that way, as they're trying to hold jobs and or as they're trying to figure out how to complete their degrees, they can see those opportunities and they can come to clearly understand those pathways in our marketing and communication messages. And then ultimately to drive additional revenue and really to just overall support additional missions within the university system. So right now, as many of you know, we've been working through a number of key issues. So we've been working on the programs that we're looking to bring to scale. So we will be working to specifically target a number of programs. We're still working through sort of which programs we believe are the right programs to bring to scale, and I hope to share with you an update in the coming months on what that plan looks like for which programs and how ultimately are we going to start to bring those out. We've also really been working on a branding request. So we've been really trying to understand how do we get strategic brand guidance as we move forward. And so we have put out a very specific RFP where we've asked for regional and national agencies to engage with us in a conversation about how we really drive a brand strategy and ultimately what that looks like. Thanks to E&Y and all of the CFOs, we are very close, I believe, to having a financial model. So we've really worked through a lot of the details. I think we have a very good understanding about what it means to scale different programs and ultimately what that opportunity then would present to the institution and to the universities. Working on aligning existing resources and data fluidity. So this really gets at some key concepts where we really want to think about how we're able to bring together systems, but how we're really able to offload some of the sort of structural issues and procedural problems within the system in order to support scale. So as we look at how students need to enroll, how students need to move through the system, how they might need to go back and forth between the universities, and ultimately what that may look like and entail, we really get to this idea of learning data fluidity and being able to support all of those learners at some greater scale in moving in that sort of transparency and permeability within the system. And so we really want to work to not only improve those metrics, but also to help drive and inform some key metrics that we've seen that are being played out at the system level. So looking at enrollments and sort of how we're actually doing time to completion. So if you come back to a lot of the metrics that Moon was talking about, where he was looking at graduation rates and Pell graduation rates, how can we be in support of those as we continue to stand up and drive the e-learning mission? And looking at the programs and how we're working to bring those through to scale. So we will be working on program nomination. We will be looking for programs where there's collaboration or differentiation in the kind of programming that we're presenting. And then really looking for scaling confirmation. So we have been working on a process where we can do basically a readiness assessment of the different programs in order to help us fundamentally understand how is a program actually prepared to scale? What additional kinds of supports might that program need within the school? Whether that's additional advising, whether that's additional enrollment support, that could be additional instruction, and really trying to ensure that as we go forward, we have the right foundations in place to really bring those programs out in a strong fashion. So I think a lot of this gets at some key ideas that I really want to sort of emphasize as part of our strategy. So one of these is that as we look to the future and as we sort of start to understand digital education, there's this idea that realistically, we're seeing a large transition in our population. We're seeing a large transition in sort of how people are thinking about and engaging with education. And whether that's in the classroom or in an online space, one of the things that we really want to fundamentally support as part of e-learning is this concept of digital education. And how are we providing the right tools and sort of the right services that we need in order to build out and scale the online platform? But then how are we also helping to inform and service the face-to-face students that ultimately are going to be impacted by that platform? And so this chart really shows this idea that online education really is sort of the most complex use case, and that most aspects of online and digital education can have very positive impacts on face-to-face education. So as you continue to drive faculty development and scale, you really start to see this, again, digitization of education. And so we now get smarter, right? So we now start to understand more about what our students are doing. What are our faculty doing? How are we able to have an informative conversation and actually start to drive that forward in the e-learning space? And so this is really where this gets at this idea of how are we building out e-learning and what are we really looking at? And so at the very base, we have this concept of academic technology. And so this is really where you're talking about the pieces of again, technology that really drive e-learning and support this overall digital education. From there, we're then looking at broad support for all online courses. And so really working to, again, provide a base layer of service for all learners who are engaging in the online space. And so that can include face-to-face students who are taking one online course, working on, completing their degree faster, moving through the program quicker, but then also the broad support for students that are in fully online degree programs, and what does that look like? And then as we work towards the top of this pyramid, you really start to get into the scaled programs and the additional services that we're talking about in order to fundamentally scale. And so you get this idea that there are lots of resources that are now being provided, and how do we align those resources and services in order to really provide this sort of deep integrated experience for our students and for our faculty and staff that really drive improvements in sort of the student learning space. And so this is where we want to really facilitate, high quality courses, tutoring services, testing and proctoring, right, to support scaled assessment at a distance. Provide the right learning analytics tools, right? So this is where we get into the ideas of student success and how are we helping to provide the information about what our students are doing to the offices and to the institutional effectiveness areas that need to understand how our students are learning, how are we crafting that experience, and then how can we actually help provide the students the right kinds of services that they need in order to learn and complete and stay in our courses and complete our degree programs on time. And so this is then where we're also talking about this move to scale. So as you look at the additional pieces that were back at the top of that pyramid, this is where in moving to scale, we're specifically looking at additional marketing, direct-to-consumer marketing, and then sort of the ideas of course development and instruction. So how are we going to provide additional scaled support in our instruction through instructional designers and technologists, et cetera. So we're also looking at part of that funnel. So as you move from marketing to student supports, right, you get into this idea of pre-matriculation services. And so this is really where we want to ensure that we're really providing the right kinds of services to help students enroll and get admitted into the institution. So I want to be very clear, this is not e-learning making admissions decisions, right? This is us partnering with the schools in order to provide them the appropriate supports to deal with the potential incoming volume of students and helping them with questions about directing them into financial aid, helping them with questions about the admissions process, helping them with questions about the degree process, and helping get them to the right individuals within the institution and assisting them in navigating their way in and ensuring that they have the appropriate supports at a distance in order to do that. On the flip side, we also want to provide those post-matriculation services where we're helping students understand what services are available to them. How are they connecting with their advisor? How are they finding tutoring and math center and writing center supports? And ultimately, what does that look like? So that's where you get into this idea of success coaching, et cetera, in the post-matriculation side. So how are we going to continue to sort of manage this internally? This is where we get at this idea of the governance structure. And so I don't know if this was shared with you a while ago or not, but this has only evolved slightly. So this is the original proposed governance structure from EY. There is one additional tweak here. We have added a finance committee. And so we will be having a finance committee that's made up of all of the CFOs. But ultimately, this group and the oversight committee, which is made up of all of the provosts from the different campuses, will really be working as the board to really drive and help us make informative decisions and really to help vet the e-learning operation to ensure that we're really efficient, that we're providing the right kinds of services back to the campuses in order to meet their missions. So one other exciting announcement that we have is that you may have seen a couple weeks ago, we put out an announcement that we've really been working to combine resources. So as we were looking across, or as I was really moving across the different institutions and meeting with the different campuses, one of the things that was very clear to me is that there are a lot of great people doing a lot of fantastic work in this space. And this is where I think that we can effectively leverage a lot of that existing work to our benefit. And so rather than thinking about how we might rebuild or sort of start again in a different competitive way, this idea is really more how do we come together in order to really build out this idea of e-learning. And this is where, as of October 1, we have a formal commitment from UMSL and from MU with Mizzou Online and Course Design and Technology, previously ETMO, to bring them in under the Office of E-Learning in order to provide really the foundational support layer that we have in order to accelerate us into fall of 20. And this is where sort of in my opening, I specifically called out interim provost Sobolik and Latha Ramchan. And so again, I would like to thank them for their endeavor into this and for really their support of this effort in bringing in these resources broadly to support e-learning. So what are our next steps? What are the things that we're really going to be working on? So we're going to be working on that organizational alignment, right? So as we bring in these resources, as we bring in these services, we really have to sort of figure out how we're going to put that all together into a meaningful way and then continue to build that out. As I mentioned earlier, we do have to continue to sort of build out marketing and sort of figure out how ultimately are we going to go forward with the brands in a big way. And so that's pretty much from now till Christmas, right? So we're hoping that realistically by January, we will have a really strong definitive understanding about the support structures that we need and potentially the third parties that we want to engage in and or the internal capacity that we want to build in order to support marketing and pre-matriculation services. So those are some of the immediate sort of next steps that you're going to see us take. We're also going to really get in on that program list, right? So as soon as we get that program list sort of solidified, we'll be out working with the various schools and starting to do some of that readiness assessment and meeting with deans and really starting to look at how we can actually start to build out the programming headed into fall. And then also what does that already look like for fall of 21? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude and really open it up for any questions that you might have.
Curator Steelman.
I have a couple. I think I want to say one other thing too. If I can address this to our new curator, Michael Williams. Sometimes we as Board of Curators wonder how you make a difference and when is enough and when is enough too much. I'm usually accused of the too much, but all of the people and Matt, who you've congratulated, and you and Haven, Dr. Choi, on down the whole team, deserve a lot of credit. But as to whether curators can make a difference, I remember when John Phillips, who's in the room today, was a voice in the wilderness before any of this new team was even here, talking about the importance of getting into the online space and continuing in adult education. And I will say this, not just for John, but for the people here and for the board, there is no question in my mind that none of this would have gotten to the point it's at had John Phillips not been out there in the wilderness. So, John, my thanks. And you hate to be talked about, don't you? Now, there are benefits to John not being on the board now, because now I get asked the questions that he would have asked. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but a couple of questions. And something I would recommend that everybody here with the institution look at. The Harvard Business Review published an article just a few days ago on how the value of educational credentialing is and isn't changing. And the point being that despite the impact or what they're saying, like companies like IBM and Google not actually requiring any educational credentialing, it's actually becoming more important. The statistics are that four-year institutions and other institutions are becoming more important in credentialing, not less important. But how that credentialing occurs is changing rapidly. And what I'd first question is, I'd like you and Haven maybe to address what is happening in other areas, in other institutions, because when we started this process in the task force, we talked about the importance of accelerating the pace of change. And you all have been very successful in accelerating the pace of change. But we don't live in a vacuum. Are we accelerating enough to be competitive? Can you bring us up to date on what some of the other institutions are doing? Haven, you might be the one here.
Happy to jump in on this. I will not go through a litany of what every other institution is doing in this space, but overall, institutions are struggling with this new role of trying to figure out how do we develop very targeted learning to the needs of an evolving workforce. And every institution is struggling with that concept. A lot of things are happening that are, quote, new and innovative. Stackable degrees we just talked about. Certificate by or credit by assessment. All of those things. Micro-credentials. We hear all these terms. But most universities are not very far along down that path. And that's a good thing. That means that this system is not behind in any material way relative to others. What we believe, what kind of EY Parthenon believes, is that the pace of change and innovation in higher education will get faster in the near-term future than it has been in the past. And it'll get faster because the economic models that we're currently used to are increasingly challenged. We all know that. We're not going to go into that. And because employers are changing the way they think about the role of a university. Historically, it was to deliver a graduate into a career. And now employers are saying, wait a minute, my workforce needs upskilling constantly, and can a university help me with that? We believe that in this rapidly changing world of higher education, the institutions that achieve some level of scale with e-learning, with online, with stackable credentials, et cetera, will be able to learn more quickly because of that scale, and therefore change more quickly. So we think it's important to get big in this space, because if you're not big, you don't have enough data points to learn from, and you won't be able to innovate as quickly as others. So the market is not closed on you by any means, but if 5 years from now we're sitting here and saying we're still only educating 7,000 or so students online, I believe at that point you will have missed a big opportunity for innovation.
And the article also points out that the players are not just Arizona State now. Michigan, Harvard, and Johns Hopkins are starting to play in this space hard. And everybody, I think, understands what is well known in the industry is that scale and getting big matters. So my two questions then, because this is a lot more speech than question. Well, I know that, but John's not on the board now, so I get to do that. Two questions. One, I did not see in your litany of matters that we were doing or in your governance, how are we going to address accelerating the pace of change? Because Another quote was, "The shift toward digital delivery in higher education may be happening at a slower pace than in other sectors of the economy." And I believe one thing that has happened, we're no longer just competing with other slow-moving institutions. We are competing. How are we going to accelerate the pace of change?
Yeah, so accelerating that pace of change, I think, really comes about with putting the appropriate resources together and building out our digital foundational structure. So right now, in order to support the kinds of scale that we're talking about, we have to have basically the technology foundation that we need in order to be able to execute at some great scale. So when you look at the different pieces and how we actually can go about putting them together effectively as we sort of start to head into marketing and starting to drive new students in fall of 20, we're really working on building out that foundational platform that we can stand on at some much greater scale. That is where we plan to leverage some third parties to help assist us and accelerate us in ensuring that we can hit some of the timeline pieces. And I think that that's a lot of the work that we've seen EY assist us with as well, is looking at what are those areas where we are strong, and then what are those areas where we need to bring in somebody to help us and in order to assist us. But long term, I think we want to build up that muscle memory and really work for how we can execute that within the University of Missouri system.
And last question, what should we be looking at regarding resources? Those of us who went to Arizona State saw a decision to invest really significant resources into student coaching, other things like that. What do we need to be looking at in resources? Are we looking at, as we're budgeting, the online having to produce its own money? Or are we looking at making, and this should be to Dr. Choi too, are we looking at making a significant investment as a system and as universities to get that success so that our Pell graduation rates can increase and things like that?
The answer is yes. We do need to make more investments. And with regards to graduation rate, we care about that not only for our face-to-face students, but e-learning students, even more so, because many of them may be those individuals who have had some college credit, they're working, and they want to work towards their degree to improve their careers. And so we have to make the investments in better advising, better coaching, and providing more financial aid for those who need it. And so the answer is yes, we need more investment. Where are they coming from? It's not coming from the state, because it doesn't look like the state's going to provide us with any more funding. We have to generate those revenues. We have to get more philanthropy. And so we're going to be working on that as a system to provide more resources and put it where we need it. Student success.
I know my time's up because Phil just grabbed the microphone and took it from me. So.
John. Yeah, Matt,
Curators.
on your next to last slide under structure, it looks like, you got Mizzou there and you've got UMSL,
Yes.
but you don't have any recognition of UMKC or S&T at this point.
Thank you for that. Yes, we are continuing to work with UMKC and S&T as well on bringing them into this effort as well. And so we hope to have them there in the near term as well.
So if we were to say, we know there are others ahead of us, like Arizona, and probably others besides that. But if we said, where are we in relation to our peers or AAU, where would we be ranked? I mean, would we be in the middle of the pack? Would we be low, or would we be ahead of most of them? How would you describe that right now at this point?
I would tell you right now, we're probably in the middle to the bottom of the pack. And so, but with a strong foundation to build on. So again, there's already been a lot of good work in this area, and I think as we're pulling together to accelerate, we really can go start to compete within the state and regionally in a really strong fashion. I do think that, and Haven can maybe talk just a hair to this, the numbers that we've shown as we were looking at national averages and as we were sort of putting together the financials, that I don't know that our costs to accelerate will be as great initially as some of those averages, which means that our opportunity truly is there. And I do think that sort of the initial ramp will be hopefully quicker than we're anticipating.
Any other questions?
Matt,
Jeff?
I had a question on structure also. It looks like a very enlightened structure, but who would you envision either or would be members of the e-learning academic council and then the student services
Yeah,
council?
so and I'm going to actually maybe pick on Steve here. So that academic council is actually already set up, and so we do have all of those members listed out on our website, and I can share those back with the board of curators. But it's a broad contingent across
Throughout the 4 campuses?
throughout the 4 campuses. That's right, and we will continue to have all 4 campuses represented in all of our efforts. Period.
How about the student services council?
So the Student Services Council has yet to be spun up. That's one of the actually last ones that we had. And so we're in the process of figuring that out now.
One other footnote I'd add to, since you brought it up, is that a lot of the academic councils includes vice provosts, it includes instructional designers, people like that that are going to help build and take ideas up to the oversight group. I also want to flag that if you could go back to that one slide, there is a faculty group that's very, very involved, the Online Faculty Advisory Committee. A dozen of the strongest faculty who have knowledge and work in the space and expertise, and they are advising that top level group of the provost and senior officers too. So those are 2 really critical pieces that we've cooked in throughout the whole process, and they're
Steve, thanks.
Yeah, Matt, I just want to say, outstanding presentation. It's remarkably different than 2.5 years ago when we were asking questions about this. I also appreciate you mentioned scale about 47 times in your presentation. I think that's critical, and clearly you understand that. I don't think we're, I don't know. I appreciate you saying we're in the middle to the bottom because I think that's probably right. I also appreciate the sense of urgency in your presentation because I think there's an opportunity here, but I don't think this is going to be around for very long. And I just want to say great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to the new opportunities that faculty in other areas in other schools that have been successful with their online learning have found. I know that there's been a little bit of question about whether or not this is a good way for students to learn, and I know there's been a lot of debate about that. I'm just wondering if you have any insight regarding some of the new opportunities, if any, that may have been created in other universities for faculty that have embraced this and jumped in, and have they been able to change the scope of their reach, educating more students? What's the feedback there?
I'll speak to that really quickly. And we're still at a point where the data is mixed and sometimes contradictory around the outcomes for online students. And one of the reasons for that is the first big shift of online students were often those who were not served by traditional universities. And so they were coming into higher education as working adults with full-time jobs and child rearing responsibilities and all that stuff. And their outcomes on average were lower than a traditional residential full-time student. They're totally different students. It's not surprising. Over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been more and more evidence that suggests that students pursuing an online certificate or degree are actually getting a higher level of interaction with faculty and the other learning resources available to them than students who sit in the last row, as I did as an undergrad, and kind of snoozed off every now and then. The amount of forced and very positive sort of learning interactions between a faculty member and an online student can be dramatically higher than between a faculty member and a residential student who's stuck with 2 classes a week and office hours once a week. So the faculty members, to your point, who have embraced that, have really driven great successes in teaching and learning. It is, I will say, though, hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes a different set of disciplines and tools than many faculty members are kind of bring naturally to that. And one of the things I've loved about what we've seen going on across the system here is a real dedication and investment in training faculty to be able to deliver online education well. More of that will have to be done, but that is actually an area where parts of the system are pretty far in advance of sort of the average and in fact, many of the state schools that are out there. So we see more opportunities than challenges, but it's not easy.
I would add too that the data analytics and data analysis that's available as an opportunity for us to understand the learning fundamentally is an opportunity. That is a shift that we're seeing our peers make. So if you look at recent hires that are out for the University of Michigan, they are heavily in the learning sciences and learning analytics areas where they're really looking to then inform their online programming and really make data-driven decisions. And that's a new realm for us, right? To be thinking about how we can make those kinds of decisions in the instructional space. And so I think that that's a major opportunity for us, and it is relatively new in the educational sector.
Any other questions? Haven, thank you very much, Matt. Great report. Great job. We appreciate it. For the next report, Avery Welker, student representative of the board. I didn't leave him off intentionally when I went through it. Avery does a tremendous job for us, and he stays very active despite an extremely busy schedule. So, Avery, it's all yours. You're a little taller than everybody else.
Yeah. Well, howdy, everybody. Good to be back up here. And before I start, I actually like to recognize the student leaders that traveled across the state to come on down to this board meeting and stay engaged. Yeah, stand up,
Please
guys.
stand.
It's really nice to have such an engaging group to work with this year. All right. So I'll get started by talking about what Intercampus Student Council has been doing. So ISC has started off the year strong with a meeting that changed our constitution to address a quorum issue, which is ensuring the ease of us holding our future meetings. We're also introducing a series of system leader speakers to our meetings to create and stimulate some discussion on current projects going around the system. For the Associated Students, University of Missouri, at the end of August, ASUM's board came together for the annual fall board retreat, during which the board voted and passed the legislative agenda for the upcoming legislative session. ASUM is also excited to be recruiting applicants for the upcoming legislative internship. Several pieces of the platform are from last year, and they are excited about the prospects of this upcoming session. All right, talking about MU MSA. MSA is in the final steps of placing Narcan, a nasal spray that halts opioid overdoses in every residence hall on campus. MSA is also planning its annual campus safety walk in which student volunteers and campus police walk routes through campus to check the blue police lights and accessibility. On their graduate front, GPC has created a health and well-being task force. This task force plans on working with health and well-being leaders and administrators at MU to pilot a student-driven support group led by students who have been given specific training to lead these support groups. Additionally, GPC plans on continuing fundraising efforts for the Financial Assistance Fund, the account where graduate and professional students at MU can apply for a one-time gift to help them with the financial hardship. This semester, GPC plans on repeating last year's very successful Shakespeare's Frozen Pizza fundraiser to support the FAF. Donations to the GPC Financial Assistance Fund can be made pizza-free anytime at giving.missouri.edu. Now for Kansas City's SGA. Where am I? Here we go. SGA's leaders ran and won on making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. They believe in representation, diversity, and being advocates for the communities that they represent. They've got their cabinet going and have been starting the year strong with some meetings. So for S&T's Student Council, they're beyond excited that our Student Fitness Center is open for business. The Fitness Center held its grand opening last May, but after the end of last semester and a summer away from Rolla for most students, it is now seeing more usage than ever. During the first week of classes this fall, the average number of users was up 906 per day, up from the 2018 average of 439 per day. Student Council would like to thank all of those that helped with this vision come to reality. In other news, S&T just finished up its Greek Week and homecoming is just around the corner. Additionally, just a few days ago on Tuesday, S&T held its fall career fair with over 334 employers looking at our students for internships, co-ops, and full-time positions. Yesterday, there were over 1,000 on-campus interviews in Rolla. And with the fantastic new chancellor at the helm and these wonderful opportunities ahead, S&T students are looking forward to a great year. Last but not least, for St. Louis, UMSL won their first ever college transit challenge this year. This challenge was formed to promote taking public transportation, and UMSL showed up with the most students. So of course, they got to brag. They got to. The executive team is focusing on improving the life of students on campus by being more visible and transparent as a student government association. And for a final fun fact, this year's UMSL SGA Executive Committee is, excuse me, Siri, sorry. This year's Executive Committee is the first all-female exec in UMSL history. And that's all I got for today. Any questions?
Great report. Thank you very much, Avery.
Short and sweet.
That's good. I have moving on, I have a couple action items. The first one would be to approve the Board of Curators Executive Committee. Since we've made some changes, obviously Michael Williams is now part of the committee, so I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? And I need a motion to move to executive session later this afternoon, but we'll do that now. Second?
Second?
I need a roll call for that, Cindy.
Curator Burnsick? Yes. Curator Chapman?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Lehman? Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Sunvold?
Yes.
Curator Williams?
Yes.
Okay, you have all votes in favor.
Next item would be review our consent agenda. Any questions on the consent agenda? If not,
I move approval.
okay, I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? We will now move on to the Finance Committee that didn't get to meet last week. So Chair Burnsick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a quick welcome to Michael. I know we're a little behind schedule, which I don't like, so I'm going to talk fast here. That's why you got a short welcome. Good morning. The Finance Committee has today just one information item and one action item, but in the interest of time, we're going to move to present the action item first. And presenting that will be Vice President Ryan Rapp, which is the preliminary 5-year capital project plans for all campuses and MU Healthcare. We're being asked to approve the preliminary 5-year capital plans as outlined in your materials. The projects outlined in your materials meet the University of Missouri System's mission and values and are recommended for approval. And Ryan will be available to answer any questions you may have following his presentation.
Thank you, Curator Burnsick. We'll go through this. This is just to remind again and reiterate that these are preliminary plans that we're asking to approve, and we have a rolling 5-year plan. So every fall, we review the 5-year plan. So the plan that was approved in April was the plan for 2020 to 2024, and this is the preliminary approval for the 21 to 25 plan. I do want to highlight that while Precision Health is not listed on this, it's because it was a 2020 project that's approved. We were with the Coordinating Board for Higher Education 2 weeks ago, and we presented that still as our highest priority project. So anyone that's wondering what might have happened to that project, it still remains our top priority. This is just to remind everyone that in September, we bring this forward to the board. Then it comes back to the board in March or April for approval. And then the third gate that every project has to go through is then it still has to come back to the board for approval. So this is really an opportunity for the board to engage early in the process and provide feedback as we prepare those plans. When you look in your materials, each project is scored based on its relations to the strategy and the mission of each university, also what it's doing in terms of facilities renewal. As we know, we have to continue to prioritize that. And then the third piece is funding. And at this stage, I would encourage you not to focus a whole lot on the funding, but really it's just saying, do you think this is worthy of further evaluation? One of the changes we've made this year, and you can see it in the materials, is we have two categories of projects. And I would imagine some of those may move from one category to the other as we continue to do our 5-year financial plan every year. But if you see the project listed as a preliminary strategic development project, it has not been committed to in our financial plan. So I would tend to view those as aspirational projects that we may be considering. If you see the project in there and it's included in the second category of it's in our 5-year financial plan, is we understand the impact of the financial profile the project would have on it, and it has been included in the 5-year plans we bring forward to the board. So with that, I'll go through each set of plans quickly and then open it up for any questions for myself or the chancellors. With MU, I think you can see all of these are projects that are currently still in that preliminary stage. One of the reasons they don't have anything in the 5-year financial plan bucket is because Precision Health is already in the financial plan for them. So they have removed several projects that they were considering, Manor House, Student Health, and the Honors College. So we've continued to see them prioritize projects. And then they did add the decommissioning and Pickard Hall as a potential project. For MU Healthcare, this is all included in their 5-year financial plan. This is no different than what we had the board approve in the spring. I think one of the things that we've talked a lot with Jonathan about is these may move, but what we do know is we're going to have approximately $250 million in capital needs over the next 5 years for MU Healthcare. It could go towards something different, but that's what we're looking at. For UMKC, you can see the conservatory was included in the 5-year financial plan and as their highest priority project. We have them 5 other projects. The Troost redevelopment project is new and was not included in the plans that were approved this spring. Then for Missouri S&T, this is the same plan that was brought forward to the board in April, and they haven't made any changes. And for UMSL, it's the same plan that we brought forward in the spring. I think we do still have some work to do with them in terms of prioritizing what projects can fit in their 5-year financial plan. But that provides the board with a brief overview of what's changed, what's included in those plans. But I really want to provide this as an opportunity for any questions you might have of myself or the chancellors for these plans.
Are there no questions for Ryan? I didn't mean to scare you all by talking about the schedule. It's okay. Even David's over there hiding. Like you need one. All right, well, if there are no questions, may I have a motion and a second from the committee to approve the preliminary 5-year capital plan for MU Healthcare, Missouri S&T, UMKC, and UMSL for further planning and development as described in your materials?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Mr. Chairman, I believe ready for a full board approval.
Are you making the motion to approve?
I am.
I need a second.
Thank you for reminding me.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Anything else? Curator Bertson?
I believe Ryan will now review the information item, which is the fiscal year 2019 status report.
Thank you. This was not included in your mailing materials. I want to thank our campus finance offices along with our controller's office. They're in the middle of working with BKD to wrap up our final financial report and get that issued. Rather than wait to the November meeting, we wanted to at least provide you with the preliminary numbers. They're unaudited, but I don't see us seeing significant shifts in anything that we're here to present today. I think we'll go through some of the highlights quickly. But I think overall, as we look, at the consolidated level, the financial performance in FY19 was strong. Now, this was largely driven by MU Health. As we look forward, though, with MU's pickup in enrollment this fall, it positions us well to improve upon that in FY20. That would be barring any outside economic forces. I think the one thing I'm not projecting into FY20 is if there was an economic downturn. I think the other thing is when we think about our balance sheet, we clearly continue to make hard choices to manage our liabilities, including the work we did with the board this year with the retirement plans, also with the voluntary separation program that we initiated with faculty this year. UMKC and UMSL, similar to other universities of their size, don't carry the same level of financial strength or performance as MU or MU Healthcare. Now, I would offer they do perform similarly to universities of their size. That being said, all of our campuses and even MU Health have opportunities to improve. The metrics and targets that we've discussed with the board and have established, I think, will ensure that we're all held accountable to achieving those. If we we don't typically spend a lot of time focusing on our balance sheet, but we do. We don't always talk about it in terms of setting our annual budgets. But if you look at this, the green line shows our spendable cash and investments, which really represents the usable working capital that we hold as the university. It excludes the endowments. And you can see the growth in that over the last 10 years. And then the other part of that is we think about our 4 financial metrics that we're measuring is spendable cash to debt. You can see the debt growth. We believe this is a key to a healthy balance sheet for any higher education institution. Part of that's we have a long business cycle, and it provides us with the liquid resources to manage through a changing environment. Also, when we look at this number, it's consistent with our credit rating peers in higher education. So we don't think we're out. If you look at this and go, well, that seems higher, that seems too low. You can see in the materials we provided, we're right on target in terms of where we'd like to be. The other way to think of this, which is the other metric we talked about, well, what do our spendable cash and investments look like compared to our operating expenses? And our target there is to have that at 1, and we're right below a 1-to-1 relationship with those. But again, this is right in line with the industry medians for an A1 credit rated higher education institution. As we move and then think about what do our liabilities look like, I think outside of debt, one of our largest liabilities is benefit related. And I would say the leadership team and the board have taken action to limit the future growth. But as we think about the run out of those plans, they will remain significant over the next couple, I would say at least decade or possibly the next 2 decades. So we've done a lot of good work, but as you can see, it's sizable. It's almost 80% of our overall debt portfolio, with the red bar representing our net pension liability. The plan is 82% funded, which I think nationally we have a sound pension plan, but you can just see the size of the overall liability is $4.5 billion. So it's large. And also, if we were to lower our discount rate by just 1%, is what we're showing there, it adds $500 million to that liability. So there's, if you said, well, we should be at 6.2, that number would go up by $500 million. If we said, well, we think it should be at 8.2, it would decrease by 500. So it shows the volatility in terms of the return assumptions. This chart really shows our growth in net position, which you can think of as just, it's our equity. Going back to accounting school, it's your assets less your liabilities. And really showing, though, that the majority of our equity is restricted. So when you look at the purple bar, that's the endowment at a little over $1.2 billion, and that is true endowment. So that's not, we have things that are quasi-endowment, but this is the true endowment. Then you look at the next largest part of that is invested in our capital assets, with the green bar at $1.3 billion, representing the unrestricted net assets of the university. This is just taking a look at those we showed you the consolidated numbers as it related to spendable cash and debt, and also spendable cash to operations. But as I noted at the beginning, the financial strength, which this is really when we think about the balance sheet, we're measuring the financial strength. The income statement, we're thinking about performance. The yellow checks that you see on there, that is where each campus's target is with the metrics we've established on these two. You can see when I said UMKC and UMSL don't have the strength of the others, it shows here, but you can also see where they're at in relation to the targets we've established. I think when you look at that, it's somewhat largely driven by debt issuance and building projects that over the last 2 decades increased leverage without the corresponding recovery in cash and investments. It's really saying we didn't see the return that we were hoping to see on some of those projects. So it will take for both UMKC and UMSL's several years of improvement in cash flow while paying down debt to recover. This chart we show in terms of our investment in capital assets, and then show that in relation to our direct debt over the last 10 years. Our investment in capital assets over the last couple of years has lagged industry trends. I would tell you that's not necessarily a good thing. That's not sustainable for us. So as we think about where we are going to have to prioritize spending capital, we will have to put money into our capital assets. And I think with the new financial performance and planning process we've put in place, it will make sure that we're prioritizing this. Now I'm going to kind of shift away from thinking about the balance sheet and the relative financial strength to really what's the level of financial performance. And the two measures that are important for us there are operating margin and revenue growth. The good news is you can see we've continued to perform at target. Yes, we saw some tightening in that this year. One of the things that drove that, though, was the voluntary separation program. So that was a $30 million cost that we took in FY19. That should provide some positive tailwinds as we go into FY20 for us. So overall, when we look at this, we're pleased with the performance. This does show you by the individual units. I'd highlight both for UMKC and UMSL. Had we not done the voluntary separation program, they actually would have had positive operating margins. So I think that's important to understand. MU would have been higher as well, but you can see, looking at this chart, that MU Healthcare continues to not only have a high absolute margin, they continue to drive much of the financial performance for the university. The next chart is just simply showing the revenue growth. We continue to see actually positive signs. Now, what's driving that is MU Healthcare, along with growth in grants and state support. We do have with the positive enrollment numbers, we would think that student service revenue we should start to see growth there as well. So one of the things we've said is it's important for us not only to generate an operating margin, but generate positive revenue growth. And I'll back up. I think the other thing that is important in this is having a diverse financial profile serves the university well. So at times, healthcare may be performing well for us, and that provides a nice level of stability for the university, and there may be times that the university is performing well. So diversification, I know it's a credit positive for us when we meet with our rating agencies. This is just to kind of close out. We had talked about establishing a financial performance and accountability policy. We have established that. We'll be issuing it in October. It incorporates the metrics we've discussed. It outlines the rules of who's responsible and accountable. Ultimately, the president is accountable for the financial performance of the university. As the CFOs are then responsible for executing on that. We also included some incentives and some disincentives in the plan. Some of those would be, you could be placed on capital project probation if you're not meeting the targets. We could prohibit debt prohibition, so you wouldn't be able to issue debt for projects. There's cases where if it got severe enough, it could kind of come into a reserve lockbox, which would be some form of like a receivership. We could implement hiring freezes, and then it also contemplates that there could be personnel actions. Then on the positive side, there could be favorable financing terms, capital project prioritization, or priority access to strategic funding. One of the things in the targets we've established, we want to hit those targets as an average over a 5-year period, but then we have a floor. So if in any individual year, if we say the target overall for the university is to hit an operating margin of 5%, we'd look at that 5-year average, and that's where we want. But we might say what it would then establish is in a given year, if the margin dropped below 0, that would trigger it as well, because you'd have one individual year where the performance drop was so severe that you wouldn't want to wait until the 5-year average moved, that it would trigger that engagement. So as we look forward to 2020, we would expect, barring kind of broader external economic terms, we would expect margins to rebound, largely driven by the expected revenue growth we're seeing in enrollment, along with the fact that we made the $30 million commitment to VSP in 2019, and that should provide some relief. We will most likely be doing a debt issuance in this next year, and that will be driven by the fact that we have some bullet maturity bonds that are turning over, and then the Precision Health Institute, along with the South End Zone project. This year we're in is really our trial year for the financial performance and accountability policy, and it will go into effect for FY21. So for all the planning we're doing now, it will be under the purview of this new policy. The other thing we've launched with the campuses is really a multiple year effort for each campus to determine what their tuition and fee strategies need to be going forward. That will be an ongoing discussion that I imagine we have with the board over the coming year. Are there any questions?
If there are no questions for Ryan, then Mr. Chairman, I believe that concludes the business for the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Vice President Rapp. Thank you, Chair Bernsick. We will move on to the next committee, Academic Student Affairs and Research Economic Development Chair Report. I will really just ask all and tell all the curators, if you're not on a committee, once in a while jump on some of the committee on the phone, because this one last week, Curator Chapman was outstanding. So, Curator Chapman.
Thank you. And in large part, that's due to Steve and professors that presented the information that we heard during the committee meeting. But good morning, everyone. The Academic Student Affairs and Research and Economic Development Committee approved 5 action items at the committee meeting on September 11th, 2019. At this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Graham, he's already at the podium, to discuss the action items. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, excellent. And we're going to try to keep this moving fairly well, so we take all these degree programs and approve them at once. But I'll go through them and hit some of the highlights. They got unanimous approval on the committee upon the presentations by the individual programs. So we have a Bachelor of Arts in Organizational Leadership from St. Louis, a Master's of Science in Business Administration at MU, a Bachelor of Science in Sports Management at UMSL, and a Bachelor of Health Science in Occupational Therapy. I'll just highlight the sports management one is kind of interesting, and we're trying to gear programs now to the market and to help students not only increase enrollment, but to help prepare students for jobs. And so that's the one that has been in the top 5 of programs requested at UMSL in the past to help prepare people to work in sports management facilities and you know, the kinds of activities they have in terms of club soccer or baseball, sports, and stuff like that. So there's a great venue in the St. Louis area, and so we expect that to be a really strong bachelor's degree program. Likewise, they have what I think is a really creative program and matches well with our earlier conversations about e-learning, and they have a Bachelor of Arts degree in Organizational Leadership. This is really designed to be a degree completion program for those people who are out in the field working, who have probably shown some success and are moving up in their careers, but don't have a degree. So it's really good to transfer for community college students, but it's really designed around a core of 27 hours in organizational leadership, org behavior, communication, critical thinking, and computer science, and then at the same time, pick up a stronger concentration in one of those areas. So it's really good for those students that probably adult learners be fully online very quickly, and we expect some good enrollments there. The next program that I want to talk about, I think, is a real breakthrough. This is a program we've been working on for a while, but it's we're calling a stackable certificate. It's a master's degree program with the notion you heard us talk about micro credentials or certificates. It's really designed such that a student can take a batch of 3 different concentrations, a core in business, and then match that up with another core that they would take in some concentration would be maybe business analytics, finance, data analytics, or something like that. And then a third chunk that could come from any one of number of colleges at Mizzou, as well as other universities in the system. So they could grab a stackable certificate in data science or data analytics from S&T or whatever.
And Steve, could you elaborate on what you mean by stackable? I think you just explained it, but at the same time, this
Might
is
have gone a
something
little fast.
this is something new to me.
Yeah.
They didn't have this, I don't believe, when I was in college. So
It's the idea that you can take 3 chunks of 12 to 15 hours, and instead of like a typical master's degree might have another, let's say 15 hours of core coursework, and then students will pick up another 15 to 20 hours of electives, and they pick and choose based on what their interests are. This is more focused in that there would be 3 sets of concentration. So I'm going to get my core foundation in business, like 1 course in finance, 1 in marketing, 1 in accounting, something like that. And then I'm going to add to that something that's a specialty, where it's a standalone. So I'm getting something before I finish the degree. So I get basically a 12-hour, 15-hour certificate in data analytics, or could be cybersecurity, or whatever once again in the business school. So I've got those 2 chunks of concentrated work in business. Now I can go grab another 12 to 15 hours in health sciences. Maybe I want to get something from vet med. Maybe I want to grab something out of St. Louis or Kansas City or S&T that's going to be allowed to be stacked on top of that. So you got 3 12 hours to make 36, or 3 15 hours to make 45. And so it's really flexible, gives the students something immediately when they get that first chunk done, and it provides that flexibility and reaches across campuses like we've never been able to do before. Great support from the graduate deans and the business schools and the other campuses, but also from the colleges like Dean Haglund Health Professions gets a chunk of a business school degree.
let me ask you this, Steve, and thank you for that explanation. Just to make sure I understand, they're getting certificates at different phases, and then after they get a certain amount of certificates, then they can get the degree.
Then they get the degree.
Okay. Now, what if a student, I think this is advantageous from a student perspective, because they can go for a couple of years, or not for a couple of years, or
Right.
whatever the time period is, get a certificate and leave. Does that hurt some of the other statistics that we maintain regarding, people, graduation rates or whatever? Does that hurt that statistic, or can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the numbers, first of all, I don't think it'll hurt completion rates, although you may be correct that there'll be some students that step out. But the numbers that we talk about in terms of retention and graduation are really undergraduate numbers. And so they're really focused on the bachelor's degrees, whereas this is a master's degree.
Okay.
So this is really for working adults, for people in business. So we don't measure that in some of the numbers that you'll see that we get compared against nationally.
Okay.
So we'd like those students to graduate. We certainly want them to get the degrees. But if somebody would stop out after 25 hours and get a really good job because they've got data analytics and some business foundations, we'd consider that a success as well.
Okay.
So it's that kind of, give me something quick that I can have a strong concentration in. And usually 12 to 15 hours in one single area like that gives you some expertise, as opposed to sort of roaming around randomly and picking up electives that you're interested in, but a little here and a little there. So it's more concentrated and yet stacks on top of each other. So
Okay.
we think this could be a breakthrough, and once again, this is designed to be offered online, and we hope, I'd like to see 300-400 students enrolled in that program in a couple years. I'm looking for Matt. Well, this will be one I think that we market, and all the other campuses can join in as well. The last degree program was the Bachelor of Health Sciences and Occupational Therapy, and this is simply the occupational therapy program at Mizzou, which has had a long tradition and been very successful with their graduate programs. Typically, it's required for a graduate degree, a master's, and very soon a professional doctorate to enter the field of occupational therapy. This is a bachelor's degree that will allow students to enter the profession as an occupational therapy assistant. Typically, in the past, that's been a 2-year degree that's offered by the community colleges, but now the profession is sort of morphing into a bachelor's program. And we feel that with the strongest OT program in the state and really in the region, that we ought to be out there first to offer that bachelor's degree. So there's a couple different entry points. So be much like what you're seeing in nursing, where you can get a degree from a 2-year institution to get your RN, but you get much better opportunities for promotion and success rates in the hospitals and stuff with a BSN. So this will be kind of a novel new idea. We also plan to collaborate with the community colleges for those that get that 2-year degree in order to help them achieve that bachelor's degree with a Bachelor of Health Sciences with kind of an emphasis in occupational therapy. So once again, really flexible, kind of creative degree programs, hitting the market, helping students prepare for work. And hopefully a lot of this stuff will be available readily to students. So I guess with that I'll stop, and I think we talked about maybe having one vote for all 4 degree programs rather than going through them individually.
Yes.
So I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate Steve and the faculty who discuss these degree programs. I feel like they meet a market demand. You know, I think Curators Snowden and Lehman were questioning them about that. It seems like these are high demand programs. It seems as though we're serving the communities with these degree programs. And so it seemed as though you guys were doing a really good job. So thank you, Steve, and thank you, faculty, the faculty that presented the degree programs. So unless there's an interest in discussing individual degree proposals in more detail, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the committee, I move that the 4 new degree programs presented by universities of Missouri, Columbia, and St. Louis be approved collectively as outlined in the materials for the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Extensions? Anything else?
That's it. We have one more. Action item. Steve, could you present the amendment to the collective rules and regulations 340.070 related to faculty leave?
Yeah, this is really just more of a technical tweak. In the policy 340.070 on faculty leave, we discovered that there was an omission, and that our clinical department faculty, such as you'd find in medicine or maybe in health professions, were omitted. And so this is just to clean that up and make sure that they have the same rights and privileges for faculty leave that others do as well. So once again, it's just something we spotted, and so this is more of a minor technicality of cleaning that up. So we're just adding that language to that anybody that's on the ranked faculty are eligible for faculty leave.
Okay. Any questions for Steve regarding the amendment to Rule 340.070? All right. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the committee, I move that the amendments to Collective Rule 340.070 be approved as outlined in the materials for the meeting.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Extensions?
Okay, this concludes
Excellent.
my report for the
Thank you.
Academic Student Affairs and Research and Economic Development Committee. Thank you, Steve.
Curator Chapman, thank you very much. We'll move to External Affairs Marketing Advancement Chair Report, and I do appreciate that Curator Graham has stepped in for the retired Curator Farmer and took over this last week.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, yeah, we did have a meeting on September 18th, and I want to add that Curator Lehman and Curator Williams participated in that meeting. And we're going to move right into much of what transpired during that meeting. At that meeting, we did hear from our communication leaders, which would be Cameron Farwell and Spinner from UMKC, Justin Roberts from University of Missouri, St. Louis, and Andy Coriega of S&T. All provided good summaries of what's been accomplished in external affairs this last year, and also in the areas of advancement. We heard from Tom Hiles up at Mizzou, Joan Nesbitt over at S&T and Paul Herring at University of Missouri St. Louis. But at this time, I'd like for Cameron to present her report in the area of external affairs and marketing for the 4 campuses, and that'll be followed by Dr. Choi to talk about advancement. And then at that conclusion of Dr. Choi's presentation, we'll have Lisa Boriano of the new Chief Advancement Officer at UMKC to make a presentation, and we'll certainly welcome her to our Board of Curator meetings. Be her first appearance.
Excellent, thank you. So as Curator Graham mentioned, we had the communication leaders at each of the universities went over their results. About a year ago, we started putting together a dashboard looking at how we were setting goals for each university and also what tactics we were using in terms of communications to help the universities reach those goals. And so essentially we put together a dashboard, which is in your packet materials, looking at each university. The first part of the dashboard looks at all the universities side by side, but the really interesting part is when you dig into each university, what their communication goals are and how they are addressing those different things. So it's really important to start with the university's goals when you're developing a communication strategy. A lot of times in communications, they'll say doing everything is not a strategy at all. And so the dashboards really do start with setting goals. And then we take a look at how we use the different tactics, social media, traditional media, traffic on admissions pages. We're all about measuring everything we do. So in summarizing what those reports, it was interesting to see that when you look across system-wide, there were 1 million engagements on Facebook. And I'll stop there for a second because getting eyeballs isn't engagement. Engagement is people actually participating in your content. So that was a really nice statistic to see. We also saw 780,000 engagements on Twitter and 90,000 stories. So I do think that sometimes there's a perception that we aren't getting our story out. I would say we are getting our story out. We can always do more. And one of the marketing rules of thumb is that you have to hit people 8 times before they really consume your material. And I think that is what we strive for, is to hit people as many times as possible, but we are certainly out there. What the dashboard shows us is that one size does not fit all. Each of our universities has very different markets. Some of us have TV stations, some of us have print, some of us have robust community journalism. I would say at Mizzou we have all, but it really changes the strategy depending on what your media market is, but also what your resources are and what your university's mission is. And so I think the dashboard really shows you that you can't just pick one and do the same thing for everyone. But we did learn a lot from each other in the process of looking at our strategies and how much we're spending and what our ROIs were. And so I think it's inspired a lot of good conversations, and we're also seeing a lot more collaboration between the universities. We're on the phone once a week. Talking about rollouts. When we push out information from the system, it might not be obvious to everyone, but it'll come out from the system, and then it's organized in terms of how it rolls out to the campuses. So there is definitely more collaboration going on. We also shared in some training together over the summer to prepare for the school year. So there's a lot going on between the universities and good conversations that have come out of this. So I won't go over what everyone presented, but I think it's interesting to look at the goals for each university last year and how communication goals, you definitely shift depending on what the needs of the organizations are. And so you'll see some shifts in some of the goals. So for Mizzou, Our communication goals on our dashboard were to shift national reputation, to grow the enrollment, and to tell our story better. This year, we're shifting one of our communication goals. It's a little bit different than shifting national reputation. It's driving research reputation with the public and with the peers. I want to talk a little bit about that difference. So, in shifting our national reputation, basically we were presenting different parts of our story that told a new story about Mizzou. And so I've talked a lot about George Smith. George Smith, that news came in October. George Smith was a major factor in our national reputation, and he continues to be. I think other things came along, and we capitalized in ways that NCAA sanctions. I think that was an important story that started out as a negative, but I think that what we ended up having happen there is the leadership that came out of our response was that really this was a question about the NCAA and how it wants to encourage integrity in its regulatory functions. And so that was a story that we took on and that our leaders helped us tell. And so Chancellor Cartwright and President Choi and Curator Sunvold were all part of helping us tell that story, and I think that matters to your national reputation. So those are just a few examples. Now we want to really kick it up in terms of research for a number of reasons, partially because research is important in our strategic plan, but it's also because we know that students and parents are also looking to hear about the great scholarship that happens at Mizzou. And among our peers, we also benefit from the reputation of peers knowing what we're doing related to rankings and other things. So you'll also notice a shift in enrollment. I think our goal was to grow enrollment, and marketing and communications isn't the only team that contributes to that. But you'll see a little shift in that we are definitely not going to take our foot off the gas in marketing to new students. But we've had 2 years of double-digit gains, and there is certainly conversation about making sure that we serve the students that we have. And I know the Chancellor is having conversations about what the right size of the university is. And so I think it'd be safe to say I don't think we're shooting for double-digit gains next year, but making sure that our enrollment remains strong and we offer a high-quality education. And then telling our story better, we're never going to be done with that one, but I think we're particularly still ramping up some important parts of our operation. So UMKC, I'll do a little bit of talking for my peers here. So in terms, they are sticking with the same goals that they were pushing last year. So really, UMKC is looking for recruitment and retention and all that communications can do for that, and particularly focused on the undergraduate. UMKC is also focused on public awareness in the Kansas City area and surrounding area, and really building up those local advocates and more understanding for all the good things that are happening here. And also, the UMKC communications and marketing team is a centralized team, so they not only support the communications of the executive leadership, but they also support the entire school and all of its divisions. So one of their goals is to create or provide very good service to the rest of campus. Missouri S&T, they're really about defining their reputation in a niche. They're looking at visibility among STEM-focused schools and really driving their reputation as a research university that specializes. Also, knowledge among their peers is very important to them, so they're looking to expand that knowledge. And also, they list as a goal for continuing to really push up visibility of efforts that relate to progress to the UM Systems Missouri Compact. And finally, UMSL changed their goals a lot for this year. And I think what we're seeing is last year they were looking at brand awareness, pushing out stories that had lots of visual appeal, and they were looking to drive traffic to their admission sites. I think you're going to see they're going to continue to focus on driving traffic to admissions. They're also working more closely with enrollment management to really focus on enrollment. And they are also looking at their marketing mix, whether or not they have the right level of paid advertising versus other strategies. And also they're looking to align their Marcom resources behind a new fundraising campaign. So I think the reason why I go through these goals is a good strategy starts with knowing what those goals are and then figuring out what it is that communications can do to support those goals. And then we measure that impact, because if we just do everything, we can't really drive the goals the way we should be. And that's my report.
All right, thank you. Chairman Graham, I would just want to provide an update on some of the fundraising activities at the 3 universities, and then Lisa Baronio will provide an update for UMKC. Our major fundraising initiatives surround NextGen, as well as scholarships for Promise and Opportunity. In terms of the NextGen gifts that are pending or that have been received and pending at Mizzou, it's about $18 million currently. The goal is up to $100 million. While we set a lower goal of $75 billion a year ago, we believe that there's an opportunity for corporate and individual donors to contribute up to $100 million. The more funds that we raise, the less we have to service the debt. And any debt service will come from other sources that would otherwise go for scholarships or research or engagement activities. So that's why this is so critical. There are about 115 total prospects with about 32 who have 7-figure capabilities and capacity. So the chancellor and I will be meeting with each of these individuals to talk about the benefits of investments in NextGen. On the scholarship side, Mizzou has raised about $24 million towards Promise and Opportunity, primarily working with the Kansas City region for the KC Scholars Program that works with 7 collar counties surrounding Kansas City. We're very excited about this, but we also have to expand this to other parts of the state. For S&T, this past year, they raised $44 million. And let me say that Mizzou raised $200 million last year, the highest amount in its history. On the NextGen project, they are working, the chancellor, the new Chancellor Dagani, is working very closely with Chancellor Cartwright on a major prospect that can make a donation, contribution that supports, among other things, the NextGen Center of Glass Sciences. And as you may recall, one of our most successful FDA-approved drug is TheraSphere, which was developed by Professor Delbert Day, working with faculty colleagues at Mizzou. On the scholarship side, they've raised about $6.1 million in a program that they call the minor. By the way, it's minor, like a minor. Minor match program for Promise and Opportunity. UMSL, we made an investment in UMSL through the strategic plan investment for the Center for Microscope Imaging and Spectroscopy. And they're going to be partnering with donors as well as industry to have another extension of the Precision Health Institute beyond Columbia. On the scholarship side, they've raised about $1.5 million, but we also recognize that St. Louis has the highest percentage of Pell students. So it's very imperative that we work very closely with the chancellor to identify new sources of funding for these very important programs. That concludes my report, Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, I am pleased to introduce Lisa Baronio, who is the new Chief Advancement Officer here on this great campus and also President of the Foundation. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Curator Graham. I really appreciate being here this afternoon. And before I get going, I wanted to share, first of all, that I've been on the job for 3 months now. I just completed the first full academic quarter here. Very happy to be here. And I also wanted to recognize three of my colleagues who are with us today. So Jay Wilson is here. He, if you want to stand up, Jay, Jeff, and Jennifer. Jeff Chapman is with us, as well as Jennifer Ingraham. They're all assistant vice presidents and work with the UMKC Foundation. We are a bit of a unique position with the university because we are the only foundation at the University of Missouri. So this is an org chart for us. I am the president of the University of Missouri Kansas City Foundation and also serve as the chief advancement officer for UMKC. I do report directly to the president, to the chancellor, Chancellor Agrawal, and I am an employee of UMKC, which is a new change from what has been in the past. Before, the president had reported directly to the board of directors of UMKC, but I report actually directly to the chancellor. I wanted to point out with this that we are a separate 501c3 organization, and it is really our mission and charge to raise funds in support of the University of Missouri Kansas City. We focus on raising those funds that are the priorities and supporting the priorities of the institution. And so as a unique body, we do have a small shop. You can see that we're a total of 18 and a half people, and those that are highlighted are really our development officers, and we do have 2 openings on our staff right now. Right now, our total fundraising productivity over the last 5 years has been growing. In 2016, fiscal year 2016, we did finish a campaign. We had a comprehensive campaign that ended with $302 million that was raised over a 7-year period of time. We had a $250 million goal. Prior to this, which is just off of the chart in 2015, we did raise $27 million. So as you can see, over the last 5 years, we have been consistently improving and increasing the amount of funds that we raised. Over those 7 years, the average was $43 million, which was what we raised in fiscal year 19. I'm also happy to say you heard the president mention earlier in his report that we had 2 large gifts that we've already closed this fiscal year. So those gifts were from the Sunderland Foundation and from the Block Family Foundation. So we've started off with a great year, already totaling over $38 million. As you can see from the last 5 years and including this fiscal year, the total amount raised and the number of fundraisers. I wanted to point this out because we've got 11 and a half full-time fundraisers, and we did raise over $43 million this last fiscal year. And typically a fundraiser is expected to raise between 7 and 10 times their salary. So as you can see from what we're raising and producing, we're doing quite well for our production. If you looked at the return on investment for UMKC and the UMKC Foundation, we're returning $12.55 for every dollar invested in our fundraising. Another way to look at this is the cost of raising money, and the cost of raising money for us is 8 cents on the dollar, and typically anything that's below 20 or 25 cents on the dollar is expected to be very good. So we feel we're in a very good position. For this year, if you look at what we're doing, most of our production has come through pledges, and a lot of that is due to those 2 large gifts that I mentioned. The one thing that I wanted to mention about them is that they're very comprehensive support for the university. So the Sunderland Foundation supported the Block Heritage Hall, supported the library, the School of Law, the School of Dentistry, the School of Computing and Engineering's Flarsheim Hall renovation. Block Family Foundation also supported not only the Block School, but the Block Heritage Hall renovation and the Ruse Student Success Program. So very comprehensive support for the institution. 25% of that total is coming from pledges. So approximately 70% of our support that we receive on an annual basis comes from the community and community support. And what we really want to do as we look to the future is to really grow our alumni support. So if we can continue to maintain what we're receiving from support from the community and grow the alumni base, we will be very strongly positioned for the future. Our priorities for fiscal year 20 include the Heritage Hall completion. We've had a renovation project that's been ongoing. And that renovation project, we needed a total of $15.2 million to be raised, and we still have $1.8 million outstanding on that. We look to finish that up this fiscal year. We're also looking to continue to invest in the next gen data analytics and program, as well as the next gen project. And we are beginning consideration for a new approach for the conservatory planning for the future, as this remains on the priority list for UMKC renovation projects. The Compact Scholars Match, we've been very strong in this program. The Block Scholars Program, which was established by the Marion and Henry Block Foundation and the H&R Block Foundation, provided $3.2 million for the Promise and Opportunity Scholars, which assists in financial needs for students, $2 million for merit-based scholars, as well as the Next Gen program. The Marion and Henry Block Foundation and the H&R Block Foundation also contributed $4.8 million to the UMKC Launchpad Promise and Opportunity Scholars and the UMKC Block Launchpad Next Generation Merit Scholars. So the total from the Block Family Foundation and H&R Block totaled more than $10 million. This is up and beyond the $21 million that they committed this year. So they're very well vested in UMKC, which is phenomenal. Additionally, Kansas City Scholars established the KC Scholars Program to provide an additional $10 million in support for students attending UMKC. Moving forward with the Promise and Opportunity program, we had 2 additional donors that have supported us for a total of $100,000 supporting the Institute for Urban Education. And I'm also happy to share with you that we are very close to closing another sizable gift for Promise and Opportunity that will focus on the Institute for Urban Education that will be in the 7-figure range, and we look forward to sharing that with the university and asking for support with that as well. The Next Gen Precision Health update. So Tom Hiles mentioned in his report to the committee and shared an update on what has been done. We did participate in several of the activities in 2018, and we continue to look forward to partnering for the future. For this fall and for upcoming activities, we have had a plan to move forward, and we're planning to engage more donors and those in the community that may or may not be aware of Next Gen. And so we have got several outreach activities that will be taking place starting next week when the president comes back to visit, and Dr. James Abbey will be joining him, and we'll be reaching out to several collaborators who could join in on the project. This fall, we also have identified a small focus group we'd like to create that would focus on the Next Gen Data Science and Analytics project and how that we can collaborate together with moving forward with the Columbia system, and to work together to finance that and to invest in it, as it will be a great collaboration moving forward. So this concludes my report.
Lisa, thank you. Are there any questions, observations? Lisa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the report of this committee. There are only informational items, no action items.
Thank you, Kara Graham. And so I will leave you, but I'm going to come right back to you as chair of the Health Affairs Committee.
And consistent with the time constraints, I do want to give a report of the Health Affairs Committee, who also met on September 18th. And I need probably not to remind the board that this is the only committee of the board that does have non-curator members. And we do have some really good things to report, so I'm just going to hit some highlights consistent with time constraints. We first heard from School of Medicine Interim Dean Steve Zweig, who gave us a really an encouraging report on the medical school. This past year that's just underway, we had 3,400 applicants for 112 positions at the medical school. And it's also a particularly outstanding class, the class, we call it the class of 23, the class that just started this fall, in terms of diversity, GPA, and MCAT scores. And it's also more than just excellent medical students. We have 150 residents with a history of 1/3 of our residencies staying in Missouri each year. Also, good news in the faculty growth area at the medical school. Faculty growth from past year to this year is from 651 up to 681. We've consistently in these board meetings talked about the need for research, and MU Health this past fiscal year was able to transfer $18 million of performance-based support from MU Healthcare to the medical school. Dr. Zweig also pointed out what we all know, but he is truly on board with the fact that Next Gen will be critical to the ongoing success of the School of Medicine. We also heard from CEO Jonathan Curtright, who is here at this meeting today and would certainly be available to answer questions over the noon hour. But we do have strategic planning at MU Healthcare underway. Kaufman Hall is the consultant that MU Healthcare is using, and they have 3 strategic objectives. The first is to make a distinct impact, a reputational type of strategic planning. Secondly, to grow our ability to serve, in other words, the reach of MU Healthcare, and also to align the University of Missouri's overall healthcare capabilities as much as we possibly can. That's the resources portion of the strategic. And CEO Curtright was able to point out that we've talked about rankings in the past. I want to hit these high points very quickly. That just recently, Vizient ranked MU Healthcare 38 out of 94 academic health centers. That's important because previously we were ranked 45th. So on the Vizient rankings, we've gone from 45th up to 38 out of the 94 academic healthcare centers. We've also, in MU Healthcare, made investments of $50 million to expand our coverage, and that created 29 additional hospital beds and 6 operating rooms with associated imaging capabilities. We also heard from Mike Blair on the financial health of the MU Healthcare, and the average daily census is up, surgical volumes are up, and clinic visits are up. And insofar as budget or plans, based on previous planning, we've had a 7% growth in net patient revenue, and we had a 9.4% operating margin, which compared to 7.2 on our planning. And I think, as many of you know, that Mike Blair did resign as a CFO to accept a position as CFO position back in his home state of Minnesota, and that's a real loss to us. Mike did such a great job, and at our committee meeting, the committee officially expressed their appreciation to Mike and wished him the best in his new responsibilities. And a national search will be begun immediately to try to find his replacement. At the conclusion of our committee meeting on the 18th, we did hear from Chief Compliance Officer Jennifer May, and she went through all the work that the compliance office is doing to make sure that we are in complete conformance with the corporate integrity agreement that the university, through its MU Healthcare representatives, has signed on to. And we are doing very, very well in that category. And as a result of that report, the Healthcare Committee, as required by our corporate integrity agreement, signed a certification that we are in full compliance with the corporate integrity agreement. I think that thumbnails, I think, the important highlights of our meeting. If there are any questions about healthcare or the medical school. And there are no action items then, Chairman Sunbolt.
Look like there's an action item.
Oh,
CIA.
well, Cindy, we talked about that.
Not from the full board. It's an action by the Health Affairs Committee only.
Okay.
The committee has actually already executed the compliance agreement, and I think we concluded that it does not require board action.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Graham. We will keep moving since we were about done, and then we've got to get to lunch. But I'll go to Curator Lehman and the audit chair report.
Thank you, Chairman. So the audit committee had one information item at the September 17th audit committee meeting. Chief Audit and Compliance Officer Michelle Peranio presented the internal audit and consulting quarterly report.
Curator Lehman,
I'm
there are
sorry.
people on the,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
Thank you. Over the last 4 years, Michelle and her team have completed on average 24 audits and consulting engagements annually, with 1/3 healthcare related and 2/3 higher education. Since the last internal audit and consulting report, 6 audits and 2 investigations have been completed. And those audits completed were the MU Health credentialing and privileging audit and social media reviews for all 4 universities. All audits were rated low risk and management action plans were not necessary. The internal audit team also completed procedures to verify the status of management action plans for previously issued audits. 14 action plans were due across the 7 audits, 6 were completed, 6 were revised and or extended, and 2 are no longer relevant and will not be implemented. Michelle reviewed with us the reasons for revisions and extensions. Details of the work completed and procedures to verify the status of management action plans are in the internal audit and consulting quarterly report available to you in your audit committee materials. Michelle provided us an update on her work to establish the ethics and compliance program. Her top priority are recruiting the team, development of the code of conduct and standards, performing a compliance gap analysis and risk assessment, and policy review and management. Michelle is available for any questions the board might have. And I want to say, great job, Michelle. And I appreciate Curator Burnsick and Curator Graham for being on the call the other day for that meeting. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle?
All done?
Mr. Chairman, this concludes the audit committee business for this meeting.
Thank you, Chair Lehman. One more group. We've got the Compensation and Human Resources Chair report. Curator Snowden.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. We had a conference call of the committee on 9/17 to discuss issues before that committee, and we will take those 4 action items up in executive session.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, so we will break for lunch. We are behind a little bit, and I'm not sure the people that we're having lunch with, I don't know their time schedule. So if we could, obviously we haven't had a break, but if you do a 5-minute break, if we could get as quickly as we could to lunch, then that will help everybody over there. So thank you, everybody.